So when Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. So it gets back to Pharaoh even. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. So Midian is a country named for their own ancestor who was a descendant of Abraham and his second wife. After Sarah died, Abraham married a woman named Keturah, and they had a series of children. One of them was Shua, one of them was Midian, and Midian becomes the father, the ancestor of this tribe of nomads, desert nomads, and they live on probably the edge of the desert. This group may have actually lived in the Sinai Peninsula. There are some commentators and others and map artists, which really bugs me because the map artists end up sort of teaching everybody with their own opinion. Because if it's in the map, it's got to be right? This is what my map says. So it's the map. And but probably these Midianites were not over in Saudi Arabia, but were probably in the Sinai Peninsula. Okay, not that far away from Mount Sinai itself, I think. Which, incidentally, is how the Charlton Heston movie portrays the Midianites living in the neighborhood of Mount Sinai. There, they got one right. Is it 1 out of 10 so far? Okay. Now, a priest of Midian had 7 daughters. Let's be careful about numerals in the Bible. When is 7 to be given special theological significance? Well, did you say when God uses it? Well, maybe not, even then. When does it have special theological weight? In visions and dreams. Yeah. Otherwise, 7 is really just 1 less than 8. It means that Jethro here and his wife had 6 kids, and they thought, let's try for 1 more. And they did. That's what this 7 means here. So we don't necessarily have to load all kinds of theological weight to this 7 here. It is simply not 8. It's like in King Lear, when the fool asks the king, why are the 7 stars 7? And King Lear, who's in the middle of going mad, says, and kind of sighs, and he sits down on a rock or something, and he says, I suppose because they're not 8. And the fool said, yes, you would have made a good fool. It's a great line in the play. So he comes to, so the priest has 7 daughters, and was it just yesterday? Is today Tuesday? It was just yesterday. We're talking about God's role in foreknowledge and in blessings and so forth. And the question comes up for my kids. Does God give me my spouse? And the correct answer is yes, but, right? I was teaching the kids really about choices that we make as Christians. And we often have perfectly good choices. And this never occurred to me before, but in the new addition to the school, I have an opportunity to teach in different ways because the floor has 2 colors in my classroom. So it's mostly gray, but there are some blue squares. I teach in the part of in the science lab, actually. So it's a classroom that's big enough to hold my whole catechism class. So I had all the kids line up on the far end of the classroom by the door, and I stood on the other side by the window, and I said, what I want you to do is walk toward me, notice what you're walking on the floor, and tell me how many blue squares you touch as you walk toward me, right? And some of the kids thought that they would be very clever, and they came to me, and they were all, and they no, I only touched 1 blue square, Pastor. And I thought, I didn't give you enough directions. I wanted to see how many blue squares you could touch. But okay, 1. And one boy actually had 16 blue squares, and he went all around the room and tried to get as many as possible. And the illustration was the Holy Spirit gives us a kind of cobblestone path in our lifetime of good works. You may choose this to do, you may choose that to do. They're both perfectly good works, aren't they? When I was a younger man, I could have worked at a restaurant. I could have worked at a fancier restaurant. I could have been a house painter. I could have been a shepherd. Which of those things did I do? I did all of those things, actually. And I was even a janitor for one day at the only 24-hour polka station in Wisconsin.
Did you sing polka?
Yes, I did. The day before, they had been oldies. And when I went to apply to work at the radio station, because I wanted to be Dr. Johnny Fever, because who didn't in the late 70s, early 80s, I found out that morning they had changed formats to 24-hour polka. No. But I didn't want to be an on-air person. And I said, do you have anything else? And they said, well, we're having a meeting with the owners today, and we need the front lobby cleaned up. Could you clean up? And so I was a janitor for one day, worked there in my corduroy pants and my best sweater with my bicycle outside the door, and I cleaned up and I got paid in cash. I just recorded that. Okay, well, anyway. It was a long time ago. Myron.
I have to ask this. You mean that one day dancing was legal in the wells?
Who said anything about the well?
Who said anything about the wells? My hometown was not controlled by the Wisconsin Synod. But it was pretty much populated by it, though. But yeah. What I was teaching the kids was God may put more than one spouse in a person's path. And so for the kids, the illustration I used was, it's as if God is dealing you an Uno hand. Which card are you going to pick? God gave you all of the cards. Are they all valid, possible, potential mates? Yes, they might be. Which one do I choose? Well, this one. Did God give me that potential mate? Yes. Will God bless my choice? Yes, He will. But would God have blessed me if I had chosen somebody else instead of this one? Yeah, He would have. Just as God blesses like a different choice in job or a different place to live, which apartment, which house, what will I do? Will I rent? Will I squat? Will I live at the marina in a boat or whatever else I might happen to do? All of those things, God blesses me. That doesn't mean that I should say that God did not give me the wife that I had. He did, but He would have blessed me had there been another wife that He had given me as well. The kids were pretty much shocked by that. They were convinced that it was some other issue, that it was either completely random or God has only one and only one spouse for me. I think they get that because they themselves are probably reading Genesis 2 in a peculiar way. God brings the one woman before Adam as the ideal mate for Adam. Well, how many choices did Adam have? One. God blessed him with her. But then again, Adam's children, God blessed them. Abraham had his choices. Noah had his choices. Sarah had her choices. Noah's wife had her choices, and so on and on and on. So, the priest of Midian has 7 daughters, and you may have the idea that Moses is probably going to marry one of them. He is. And they came to draw water. So, at the beginning of the chapter, what girl draws something out of the water? Pharaoh's daughter. And she becomes Moses' what? Mother. Now, the priest of Midian's daughter comes to draw water. And what is she going to draw out? Moses to become her husband. Yeah, so we have these echoes in the story of, I think Moses is recognizing this as the story progresses. They came to draw water to fill the troughs of water, their father's flock. I just talked about that. So some shepherds came along. We don't know what nationality the shepherds were. They were just shepherds. I don't know, were they other Midianites or whoever? They came along and drove them away. But Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. So Moses jumps in and sort of, here I come to save the day, and he waters the flock for them. Does this part of the story, Moses at the well meeting the girl, does this remind you of something in Genesis? That's how Jacob met Rachel. Yeah, as well. So when the girls return to Reuel, their father, Reuel, by the way, means friend of God. Jether is a title. The Jether. I think his name is probably Reuel, but Jethro is his title. Something like that. You okay with that? He has a couple names. Not a big deal. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." So with Moses there, he could do what 7 of them could not do quickly. And part of it was probably that he drove away the other shepherds, that they got their turn early. Why did they think he was an Egyptian?
Probably still dressed like one.
Dressed like one, accent, haircut. Did he have the Egyptian sunglasses? Do you know what those are? It's the black paint around the eye. It's called the Eye of Horus. So it's a circle around the eye with a line down and a line over, like a kind of a capital R. Why would that? Well, what do baseball players wear when they're out in the sun? Eye black. It's the same thing. That's primitive sunglasses. That just helps the sun to not get absorbed by the skin that's going to bounce up into your eyeball. So it just helps you to not have to squint so much. That's what that stuff is. But very common among the Egyptians was to wear the Eye of Horus. Now, don't come up to communion with the Eye of Horus painted on your face the next
I just thought of another explanation. He probably walked like an Israelite instead of like an Egyptian.
Thank you, Susanna Hoff's dad. Okay. Way to go, Myron. He didn't walk like an Egyptian. Yeah, okay. Do you know how that song was created?
No, I don't know.
During an earthquake. They were in a there were people in a cable car in, I think it was San Francisco, and there was an earthquake, a tremor, and one of the people, I don't know if it was the driver or whoever, telling the people to go out sideways so to make room for everybody. He said, "Everybody walk like an Egyptian." And he did that, and it stuck with one of the girls in the band. I don't know if it was Susanna Hoffs or if it was one of the Peterson girls or who it was, but anyway, that's how the song got done. Yeah. Speaking of the Bangles and their music, Prince wrote a bunch of their songs. When did Prince's guitar land in New Ulm, outside of the Music Hall of Fame? How long has that been there? Months. Not like 10 years, Pastor. Okay, good, because I just noticed it.
Henderson, Minnesota needed to get rid of it. That's where it is.
Is that really true?
Yeah. Why did Henderson adopted Prince when he died, kind of, because he had filmed part of the Purple Rain down in the River Valley. Not actually even in Henderson, but Henderson was like, okay, let's play on this, and
Yeah.
it was a big mural, but there was a big things out in front of different buildings, and it just kind of hasn't flown. So you guys got it.
So they got rid of it. Okay. Hey, you're in a Bible class in New Ulm. You have to say we. We got it. So no matter where you live.
Okay.
It's ours now.
I want the part of
Verse 20. "And where is he?" he asked his daughter. "So this guy helped you? Where is he?" You didn't your mother and I teach you anything? So why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat. Moses agreed to stay with a man. We got some story in between verses 20 and 21 that's missing, don't we? When the girls run out to go find him and so forth. Moses agreed to stay with a man who gave his daughter Zipporah or Zephra. You can say it either way. Probably easier to say Zephra, but it's not going to come quickly when you see the name. So Zipporah is probably easier. Or do you want to say Zipporah, as if she's this thing on your shirt? Yeah, she's the Zipporah. No. All right, I'll shut up, Paul. All right. In marriage. So, there is a little bit of an echo of Laban here. You've got a father with all kinds of daughters. He's got too many daughters. And now this guy comes, and you know what? I'd like him to work for me. So let's get him into the family here. You marry one of the girls, you have the oldest, and now you're my son-in-law, and now I've got you. And how long does Jethro have Moses? 40 years. That's more than Jacob worked for Laban. So I wonder if that was on Moses' mind too as he's writing Genesis. Though this guy got off easy, this Jacob, yeah. Zipporah gave birth to a son. Moses named him Gershom, saying, I have become an alien in a foreign land, or a stranger in a strange land. Gershom is spelled two different ways in Scripture. It's almost dead even. Does it end with an M or end with an N? Gershon or Gershom, depending on if you're in Chronicles or Genesis, it's either Gershom or Gershon. His descendants are going to be the Gershonites or the Gershomites, and I don't know. Names kind of soften and change after a while. I have told you, haven't I, that Luther spelled his last name 10 or 12 different ways. Shakespeare spelled his name 4 or 5 or 6 different ways. So standardization of spelling really came to us with maybe it was Webster. Maybe. Webster is what, 1730s? Something like that. I'm not exactly sure about Webster. Maybe that's a little bit off by a couple of years. But yeah, standardization. And now my computer thinks I spell everything wrong. So that's partly because my fingers can't spell. Do you ever type so fast that you're typing by muscle memory? So it doesn't matter how much I concentrate, the word the comes out T-E-H when I spell it. So yeah, just one of those things. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. There's a chronological milestone for us. If you're going to put the story of Moses into the line of the pharaohs somewhere, this has to happen while Moses is in Midian, correct? Pharaoh dies. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. Is there gospel there? Does God hear our prayers? Yes, he does. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. There's weight in that verse, in verse 24. God made this deal with Abraham. He wasn't just talking one day with a buddy. He made a covenant with Abraham. He made a covenant with Isaac. He made a covenant with Jacob. How do you make a covenant? You cut a dead animal in half, and you walk between the pieces, and you solemnly swear, may what happened to this dead animal happen to me if I break this covenant. That is why the verb for make a covenant in Hebrew is berit, to cut. It is a cutting of a covenant. When I'm teaching that at school, I will often have the kids bring in their coats, and then we pretend that those are animal carcasses, put them left and right, and we walk through the middle. When I was at MVL a couple years ago, I got permission from the principal to take an old coat I had that had a fleece lining but looked a little bit like a sheep, and I took it a box cutter, again with permission from the principal, and had a couple of students hold it up, and I cut that fleece coat in half like it was an animal and laid it on the ground, and we walked through it together and made a covenant just to demonstrate what a covenant is. So God remembered these covenants. Remember with Abraham, who was it who made the covenant? God, and not Abraham. How did God make the covenant? Well, the smoking fire pot flew through the pieces while Abraham was watching. Abraham didn't even do it, but God did. It was a one-sided covenant, which is unheard of. How do you make a one-sided deal? I'll make a deal with you. If you do this, I'll do this. God's covenant, I'll make a deal with you. I'll do this. That's God's covenant. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. So God has compassion. He is thinking of them. He knows what's going on. And yes, Brad.
Can you say a little bit about remembered? Because that can give the impression that God forgot, and God doesn't forget.
No, he doesn't forget. But if he remembers, how much does he remember? All of it. Yeah. He doesn't just remember some of it. He remembers absolutely everything. And he remembered that he had told Moses, this is going to be for 400 years.
His covenant with us is also one-sided.
Yes. Yeah.
He does it all.
I have forgiven you. Yeah. What do we have to do? Nothing. Yeah. It is the same thing I had to do when my brother gave me snowballs as a child. I just had to receive them. Maybe this winter I'll bring in some and let some of you receive some snowballs from my hand. But a little bit of chronology here at the end of the chapter before we move on. So 1486, Moses is 40 years old and he flees to Midian. We know that in 1479, the old Pharaoh, Thutmose II, died. His son was, I think this is on your second sheet. Thutmose III was how old? 81, 87, 82. Thutmose III, the Pharaoh of the Exodus, was 2 when his father died. And so on the throne is this woman, Hatshepsut. 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 Let's say her name together. Hatshepsut. Now say it fast once. Hatshepsut. That's how you say her name. And of course, which member of our congregation is named for her? I'm kidding. Hattie Scharf. Yeah, it's probably not. But I don't know what Hattie's full name is. Does anybody?
Is it Henrietta?
I don't know. I think it's Hatshepsut. So Hatshepsut. Now, Sobek Neferu in an earlier dynasty had been the first pharaoh queen that we know of. A pharaoh queen was a pharaoh in every sense of the word. She got to hold on to the reins of state in her statues. She has little cylinders that she's hanging onto, probably that had the reins going out to the front of a chariot. And she has what on her face if she's a pharaoh? A beard. The statue would have the beard also if she's pharaoh. So Snobek Neferu is a woman but has the beard. She is a pharaoh. And Hatshepsut has statuary that depicts her also with the beard because her ward was only 2 when he became pharaoh. So Thutmose III reigns alongside Hatshepsut, the pharaoh queen, until she finally dies in 58. And he, at that time, I think I wrote that down somewhere, is he 30-something? That be about right? No, not quite. 30?
You have 33 when Moses
33, is that right?
comes back.
That's in 48. That's 10 years later. So he's 23 about. Yeah, and Hatshepsut dies. And now he becomes sole pharaoh of Egypt. By the way, he reigns 54 years. Very long reign for a pharaoh. But a lot of that when he was a baby. So he dies at 56, having reigned for 54 years. So that's Thutmose III. And then in 1448 or so, I don't know exactly the year that Moses went back to Egypt, but it's before 1446. That's the year of the Exodus. But how long did the plagues take? Did they take a whole year? Is it a plague a month or so or something like that? So it might have been in 48 or 40, more likely in 47 sometime when Moses came back to Egypt. Remember, we go backwards with Old Testament numbers, years, because we're marching backward toward the birth of Christ. And that magic year, 1446, the year of the Exodus. And I've said this before, I'll say it again today. In 1492, the Pharaoh's name was Thutmose II. In 1446 BC, the Pharaoh's name was Thutmose III. Now, Hatshepsut, I told you I'd show you a picture earlier. This is from a recent visitor to Egypt. But this is a very recent photograph of the complex of Hatshepsut's memorial tomb. She doesn't have a pyramid, but look at that beautiful thing. Big old ramps built just right for wheelchairs and whatnot, right? And everything. And but buildings in the front, and then big colonnades and so forth, more toward the back. So just a gorgeous area building. The people who have gone there have said it's just a beautiful place to visit. If you can stand that far of a trek out into the desert to see it. I think this is at Karnak. But that's Hatshepsut's memorial tomb. We'll pick it up there at verse 3 and the burning bush next time. Until then, God bless you all. And thank you again for letting me do this. You've been listening to Invisible Church, the Bible study podcast from St. Paul's Lutheran Church, New Ulm, Minnesota.